All right, looks like we have finished that poll. So thanks for answering that. It's great to see that a lot of people said that their exercises were great. Some of them are a little bit difficult, but it is supposed to be a bit of a challenge. All right, so for today's session, we're going to start with a quick slide about an interesting application of software related to gene editing. We're going to review what we did last week, which was the if statements and our logical expressions. And then we're going to go over the content for today's session. So we'll be introducing lists, and we're going to be introducing loops as well. So you might have heard about technology called CRISPR. It's a biotechnology that allows scientists to be editing genes, including human genes, and it has a lot of potential to be curing disease. But there is risks associated with it. So sometimes the gene editing can cause unintended side effects, changes that they didn't mean to make. There is a new app. This was just in the news this month. They called it Decoder, and it uses some sophisticated algorithms to be quickly detecting any changes from the gene editing that might have been unintentional. And that's going to give doctors time to assess the potential risk of that. So that's one pretty amazing use of software. Definitely very important if we are going to be trying to do gene editing. We definitely want to do that safely. All right, so we're going to review the content from last week. So we were talking about the if statements. So we introduced, you can have the if, you have the elif and the else. So here's one example of that. So on the right, we can see what our code does. So we can see that if the mouse Y position is less than 500, so if it's on the top half of the screen, we can see that the fill style will be set to red. And if it's not, so if it is on the bottom half of the screen, so it will first check, is the mouse X less than 500? So that would mean that the mouse Y is greater than 500, and the mouse X would have to be less than 500. So that would mean that if it's in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, then we are going to be using the fill style blue. So we can see that it's blue when the mouse is in that spot there. And then the last case, if neither of those two conditions were matching, then that's going to have to be the bottom right, and we're using the fill style green. So we also talked about logical operators. So this is what allowed us to combine conditions together. So we have the and, the or, and the not. The and was true only if both sides of it were also true. The or was true only if any of them are true. So one of them can be false, but at least one has to be true. And the last one, the not, that one was flipping the Boolean statement. So we have a true, then we can use the not to flip that around. True will become false, and false will become true. Okay, so we're going to start the material for today. It's going to be first with lists. So what is a list? So a list is a container for multiple values. So a list is itself a value, and it is containing multiple values inside of it. So that's handy for storing a lot of whatever values that you want inside. So it's an efficient way of creating and storing a collection of similar values all together. So one example here, if we have a collection of students, so Henry, Alice, Jack, Alex, Carrie, we could store all those students into one list. So how do we make the list? So the syntax for this, we're using the square brackets. So when we use these square brackets, we list our values inside, and we'll use commas to separate them, and that is going to create a list. So these lists, they can hold any kind of data that we want. So inside we can have numbers, strings, or booleans. Um, Generally, you'll have the same kinds of values inside. So in this list, we have random numbers. We have numbers 100, -2, 303, 44. We can also have a list of students. So here we have multiple strings. We got Henry, Alice, Jack, and Alex. So that's the syntax for creating these lists. So again, that's the square brackets and the commas separating each of the values. Okay, so before I get to that, I'm just going to show that in here first. So I already have my boilerplate stuff set up. I'm going to create my setup function, and in here I will create a list of colors. So I'll have a variable name, colors, and I'll want to assign a list to that variable. So I create start with square brackets, and then inside I'll put in names of my colors. So red, orange, and each value is being separated by a comma. Okay, so if I run this, it's not going to do anything because I'm just assigning to the variable, but I can actually use a print here. If I print out that variable, it will show each of the values that I have inside there: red, orange, purple, and green. Okay, so that's how we can create those lists. But now we want to talk about how do we use the values that are inside of it. So to be accessing the individual values inside, we're going to be using what we can call an index. So the syntax for this is to have the name of your list, square brackets, and then your index inside of here. So these indexes are starting at 0. So if we have this list here with these 4 numbers, you can see on the right, we're showing what the index is and its value. So because our index starts at 0, the value with the index 0 is 101. So that's what we would think of the first value. At the index 1, we have -2. Index 2 is 303. And at third index, we have 44. So to get the third value, so we're thinking of that as being 303, that's our third value, then we'll use index 2 to access that value. So there we would, here we're putting in the variable name, square brackets, and putting in just the number of the index we want to access. So I'm going to show that with my colors here. So you'll see that it was printing out all the colors. Now, if I want to print out just the first color, then we're going to need to use the index for that. So the first value, our index, has index 0. So this is going to print out our first color, which is red. So I'm going to run that. You can see it's printing out red there. If I change that to 1, it's going to print out orange. If I change that to 3, that should give us the last one. So that's 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it'll print out green. There you can see it's printing out green. Okay, so for using those lists, that's basically how you'll want to use them. That we create our list first, assign that to a variable. So here we have 3 different numbers. So if we want to use that with a function, so if we want to draw a circle, here we will use the access each value with its index. So that's going to give us the 75. This one's going to give us 100. And there we're going to have 50. If we try to just use circle with numbers, that doesn't work because that's only it's only one value, one argument that we're putting in. And circle is looking for 3 different arguments, so you do need to be accessing each value individually. Okay, so now that we have our lists, we might want to be modifying the values that we have inside of them. So if we start with this list here, with the values 2, 5, 6, and 8, so we can use that index to update what we have inside of it. So this is going to look very similar to modifying variables. That on the left-hand side, we have what we want to be updating. So here we want to be updating the value that we have at index 0, and we have the equal sign, and then the value that we want to update it with. So this is going to change what we have at index 0 to 3. So let's show that here. First here, we might want to change one of those colors. So we need to first figure out what's the index of that. Index here, index yellow there. And now let's print it out a second time. And we should see that it gets updated. Okay, so you can see that our first list had the orange there, then it had the yellow the second time. All right, so we're on to our first quick question. We have some code on the right-hand side here. We are creating a list, assigning that to x. We're changing one of the values here, changing another value, and then we are drawing a circle here, and we're using one of the values from the list. And so that question is asking, what is the diameter of the circle going to be? Looks like there's still a few more answers coming in, but yeah, we've just closed the polling. So we had majority 55% answering 100. So yes, the majority do have the right answer. So let's go through and see why that is so. Okay, so we start with initializing our list. We have 4 values, 20, 40, 60, 80. So here we're updating the value that has the index of 1. So remember that our indexes start at 0. So that means that we're going to have index of 0, 1, 2, and 3. And then when we're updating the value at the index 1, we're adding plus 10 to it. So we're taking 40. Plus 10 is going to replace this with 50. And then we're going to be updating the value that's at the third index. So that's that value at the very end. We're going to take the value at the first index. So we're taking 50, multiplying by 2. That's going to give us 100. And we're assigning that to that index spot there. So instead of 80, it's now 100. So then when we're running the code, the circle is going to look up that value. So the diameter is going to be drawn with 100. Okay, so we talked about modifying the list, but how do we make the list bigger? If we want to add more items to it, then we can do that as well. So we have this example here of a shopping list. We've got 4 values in so far. We've got eggs, ham, cheese, and onions. But on the way to the store, we remembered We also need two more items. We need milk and bread also. So if you want to add to the end of that list, we can use the append function. And that's going to be adding these items to the very end there. So here's the syntax for that. So we use the name of that variable at the start. So we have our shopping list. We need a dot, and we have append, and then we have whatever value that we want to be adding to it. So this line right here is going to be adding the milk to the end of our list. And the second line here, appending the bread, is going to add bread as well to the end of that. So that's going to add those two values to it. So we can also remove items from the list. So very similar to the append. The function for this one is called remove. So the same syntax here. And you pass in the value that you want to have removed. So we'll see that we removed ham and onions. So previously, I'll go back to the other slide. We saw that we had ham, we also had onions. Then when we remove those, you can see that ham is no longer there. Onions is also gone. And you can also see that all the other items have been squished together. So the indexes have been a little bit updated. Okay, so let's do both those things with our example here. So I'll just make this list a little bit shorter to start with. I'll take out that update. So we'll just start with these two colors here. If we want to be adding more colors to it, we have the name of our variable. We'll use append to add a value to it. So let's add the green to it. We can print that there are new value. We can see that green is going to be added to the end. And if we want to remove one of the values, we need to use the remove function. And which one do we want to remove? So depending which one you want to remove, that's what you'll put in. So we can get rid of, let's say, the red one. So we are removing red here. Let's print the colors again. So now you can see we have three different values. So we started with red and orange. We're adding green to it. And then we remove red. So red is removed from the start, and we end up with a list of two colors, orange and green. So because we've been adding and removing from that list, now you'll realize that the length of that list might be changing. So if you want to know how many items we have in that list, there is a function that lets us know. So this one, you just have len, len, all on its own, and then we pass the variable there, and that's going to tell us how many items are inside that list. So I'll add in a few more appends in here. Let's change these up a little bit. So we've added in all these different values. We've removed something. How many colors do we have in here? I have no idea right now. I don't need to figure that out. I have a function that's going to tell me. So I'm going to use the length. I'll put that into a variable actually. So n, I'm going to use the length function. And this is going to tell me how many colors I have. And you can see that it's telling me that there's 5. This is our last value there that we printed out. We were left with 5 colors at the end, and that length function is going to give us just the number of how many there are. So there's one question in the chat about using just the len. So we could replace this with like so. So we could do print and have our function right here, len of colors. That's going to do the exact same thing. If we run that, it's doing exactly the same thing. All right, so now we're on to the first exercise. So you're going to use a list to be drawing 4 rectangles. And the rectangles, there should be growing with the mouse X. So when you move your mouse left and right, they should be getting longer and shorter. So the hint here is to think about what you want to be storing in that list. You want to be storing what is different for each of these bars. Okay, so we're going to move you to breakout rooms now. We're going to give you 10 minutes to work on this. The X is going to be the same, so its width is should be the same. It's just going to be based on that mouse X. So let's go through and code this up. So we started with, I'll put my code into the setup here. Already got the size there. So we can start with, if we want to draw just one of these rectangles, we'll use the rect function and we'll put it to start on the left edge, we need to have it with a size 0. Or sorry, that's the X position of 0. Let's just give it a Y value. Let's put it somewhere there. We need to set the width to the mouse X. And the height of that is going to be just a small height there. Oh, sorry, we need to put this into a draw function in order for it to actually work with the mouse X. And we are going to need a background. So let's just make this a, let's see, yellow background. We'll do just yellow. All right, so we got our yellow one, and we have a bar now that's following our mouse X. So that's just one. We do want to have 4 of these. We also want to make, let's update this to be a blue color. Oops. All right, so we're almost there. We have one bar that's on this showing the screen. It's blue. So now if we want to create 4 of these, we can put the different Y values. We'll put those into a list. And we can put the list actually inside here, put it at the top here. Let's have a Y list, and we'll put in different Y values here that we want. 50, 130, 275, 400. And now we will replace the Y value that we had here. We'll replace that with the first value. So to get the first value, we'll use the index 0. And now we do need to copy this a few times for each of those. So we'll have one for the next index, up to down with 2 and 3. So now we should have all our bars. So now you can see we got 4 bars displaying on the screen that are following our mouse. All right, so that was the code that we had there. Create our Y list. So we had to figure out what value is going to be different each time. And then we are using, accessing each of these values in there, drawing that rectangle. All right, so we're done with lists for now. We're going to be back to those pretty quickly, but we're going to go on to loops now. So what are loops? So a loop is what lets you repeat code multiple times. So you'll have your code will be inside of some spot, and then we'll be repeatedly going through it. So loops are going to be good for when we have lists, because we want to do something multiple times, each time with one of the different items in the list. So today we're going to be going through the most common type of loops. That's the for loops, and that's the loop that works very closely with the lists. So an analogy to explain what the loops are about. So if we have a dentist who is checking teeth, this is the loop that they might be following. So they'll start at looking at the first tooth. They'll check to see if the tooth is healthy. They'll move on to the next tooth, and they'll keep repeating that loop. So they'll go back to checking the next tooth, check to see if that tooth is healthy, move on to the next tooth, go back, check to see if it's healthy, move on to the next tooth, and they'll just keep repeating that until they have gone through every tooth and checked that every tooth is healthy. So we're showing now how to use these loops with our lists. So if we want to run some code for each value that we have in this list, then we're going to use a for loop. So in this example, we have a shopping list. We've got eggs, ham, cheese, onions, and we're going to be looping through each item and doing something with each item. So the code here that we have is just printing each item. So the syntax for this, we start with the for, then we have a new variable here. So we need to create a variable here. We can name it whatever we like. An item is pretty descriptive. Then we need to have in, spelled exactly in, and then the variable that has our list. So that shopping list that has our list of items. And this is similar to an if statement, has to end with a colon. And then the body of this for loop, so all the code that we want to be part of this for loop has to be indented. So press the tab in order to get an indentation. That's just the same as for the if statement. So let's do this for our first example with these colors. So I'll take out what we had in the middle here. I'll add in one more value. So if you want to print out each color, we can use a for loop for that. So we'll do for, we'll name it color, in colors, add in the colon. If we hit enter, it automatically is indented for us, which is nice. And then we write the code that we want to happen for each of these values. So for each color, we want to print it out. So we'll do is print color, the name of that variable, which is going to be holding each of those values. So this is for each of these values is going to print out, the first one's going to print out red, orange, and green. So here you see it printed out red, orange, and then green. All right, so we have another quick question here. We have a for loop in here. We have some code inside here that's going to run. So what will be printed when we run this code? All right, so we had a clear majority, 64%. We're answering 10. So yes, that is the correct answer. Majority does have the right answer again. That's great. So let's go through this and explain what's happening here. So this for loop, we are going through each of these values. So this code, the x plus equals number, gets repeated for every value that we have. So that means that the first time that we run it, we've got the value, it's going to be have a value of 2. So we're going to be running x plus equals 2. So when we run that, x plus equals 2, that's going to add 2 to our x variable. So that's going to be updated. It's going to have 2. And then the next time that it runs, we're going to be on to the next value. So we're going to be on to 3. How do I get my... Okay, I'm not sure how to get my my drawing back. There we go. Okay, so then we're on to the 3. So we'll have x plus equals 3. So they'll add a 3 to this. It's going to be plus 3. And then we'll finally have plus equals 5. So 5 plus 5, then we'll have 10. And we'll be printing off 10. All right, so when to be using these loops? So let's go back to the code that we had in that exercise 1. So you remember that we had those 4 lines that we were drawing 4 different rectangles. And each time we were using one of those values from the Y list. So we notice that this is pretty long, and it is definitely repetitive. That I even showed that I was using the copy paste. So definitely repetitive. The only thing that was different each time was which value. It was we were changing the index to be accessing its value. So definitely we don't want to be repeating all these lines. So we want to be using a for loop in that case. So we can take the same code that we had before. We'd be able to replace it with a for loop. So we have that Y list again. And here we have our for loop. We have 4. We have a variable named Y. So that's going to hold the value for each of those values in the Y list. We have our variable Y list. And then we have this line here, which is based on this line here. We've simply replaced the Y list with the accessing by index, replacing that with our variable that's holding the value that we loop through. So I'll quickly show how that looks. I'll just quickly update the code that we had here. So we can do a for loop instead. So we can do the for Y in that Y list. Let's cut out this line here, get rid of the previous ones. And now instead of the Y list there, we replace that with the variable that we're using. So now when we run that should be exact same. You can see it's drawing all our bars. It's doing the exact same as the code before. So here's just a quick animation that's showing how this looks. So it starts Y is equal to 50, runs the code there, goes back to the start. Y is set to the next value, 135, runs the code, goes back to the top. Y is now 275, runs the code again, goes back to the start for Y, and now we have is our last value, Y is 400, runs the piece there, and then the loop is finished, and it goes on to whatever code is after that. Okay, so now we're on to the second exercise. So you'll use a list and a for loop this time to be drawing 5 circles, and they're going to be falling down the screen. Hint here is to think about how the loop helps us draw the circles a lot faster instead of writing them out each time. Okay, so we're going to put you into breakout rooms, and you'll have 10 minutes to work on that. Oh, right, looks like we almost have everyone back. Okay, so let's go through this exercise. We needed to use the list and the for loop, drawing 5 circles, then have them falling down the screen. So this is somewhat similar to these lines that we had there. I'm going to create a new cell though. I'll just do the bit of a boilerplate here, just get the size. So I'll need to have a draw function here. And we're going to need to be drawing those different circles. So we'll have something pretty similar to last time. So what's changing between, so what's different for each of these circles? This time their X position is different. So in that list, we want to have each of those X positions. So let's create a list for the X positions, X position list. And we'll put in a are the different positions that we want. So this one is putting them 60 pixels apart. And we need to have a background. And I'll set up, so that's going to be that light green background. So now to draw each of these circles, we're going to use that for loop. So we'll use the variable x for x in our list, x position list. So here we have our code that we're going to be repeating each time. So that's going to be drawing the circle. So we use our circle function to draw that. So we'll use our x variable that we just created there. So that's going to give us x. And then we're going to have our y position. And then we have a diameter for that circle. So if we draw that, we've got our circles set up there. Now we just need to make them actually fall down the screen. So we're going to need to be updating that y position. So we need a variable to be holding that y, but it's going to have to be a global variable because we're going to be changing it between each of those frames. So let's create a y position variable. So we'll start it at 0. So now we'll take that variable, put that into there. And at the end of this loop, so we'll put it outside our loop. At the end of our draw function, we'll increment our y, and we can just increment it by some constant value. Let's try 5. Oh, and we do need to use the global keyword. It's not called y, sorry, it's y position. Y position. So right now they are moving at a constant speed. It's a little bit laggy on my end. But if we do want them to be accelerating downwards, we're going to have to be making them speed up faster. So to do that, we can have a speed. Let's use a speed variable. And we can start the speed, actually we can start at 0. Add that to our list of global variables. So now instead of having a constant value that we are moving the position by, we'll be moving it by the speed. And we want the speed to get faster. So each time we can increase the speed by 1. So it's just going to keep accelerating faster. Okay, and that now looks like they are accelerating down faster. Let's just run that one more time. Looks pretty nice. It's kind of laggy, but okay. So yeah, you can see that we have the acceleration going there. We had our for loop there. So that was drawing each of those circles. All right, so we are almost at the end of the content for today. So one last bit of information here. We can also be using if statements inside of these for loops. So for this example here, we have these if statements here. They're going to be changing the color of each of the circles. So let's see how this is working. So we start with the x is going to have the value of 30. So we're going to be trying to draw our first circle. X is greater than 150. No, that's not matching. Is equal to 150. No. So for the first circle that's being drawn, it's going to be drawn as blue. So then we're going to repeat back to the top. Now the x is going to be equal to 90. We're going to step through these again. Is it greater than 150? No, it's not. It's not 150. So else is matching again. Another blue circle. Repeat back to the top. We're on to 150 now. Is 150 greater than 150? No, it's exactly that value. So now we have this one matching. So we're going to have a yellow color. Draw this a yellow circle. Repeat back to the top. Now we're at 210. That one's going to match greater than 150. So it's going to be red. And for 270, that one is also 270 greater than 150. So this one again matches the fill style red. goes to drawing the circle. And that is the last one, and that is finished. Okay, so now we're on to the exercises. So for the bug busters, the first exercise here is to be drawing just these concentric circles around wherever the mouse is. Looks a little bit disorienting when it's moving fast, but it's just a whole lot of circles repeated around the mouse. The second exercise, drawing these circles, so whenever the mouse is clicked, adds another circle, and it sets the x position is wherever the y position is the same as the mouse y. Okay, for the Pythonic lava, there's this loading bar. So as you move the mouse, it draws the squares right up to where the mouse is. Move the mouse farther, more circles get drawn, squares get drawn. And on the right side here, what looks like a pyramid. So this is just a lot of squares you can probably start with the one in the back and then just make all the smaller ones. And a few extra ones just for fun. This one is pretty nifty. It's like a yarn ball. And this one is like a breakout game. Okay, so we are going to send you out to breakout rooms in just a minute, but first we're going to mention there is a feedback form that we wanted to let you know about. So yeah, Julian, thanks for posting that in the chat. So there's a feedback form. This is the midway feedback that we are kindly asking you to fill out. So you can do that. During the breakout room, or you can do that afterwards when you have time. And I believe there's also going to be an email sent out to remind you about that, if that does slip your mind. All right, so we've got 22 minutes now, so that's going to take us to the end of the session. We're going to move you now to the breakout room so you can work on those exercises with your mentor.